You've entered BOOKSTORM with Kristen Civiletto and me, Chris Storm. This is a podcast devoted to best-selling books that matter, books that make a difference. We're diving down deep with beloved authors about their stories. We're exposing hot-button topics and heartfelt themes, the issues that affect each of us in our own lives, as siblings, parents, partners, friends, as human beings. We're braving new ideas, fresh thoughts, hard lessons, and important truths. Those kinds of things that stay with us long after we turn the last page and close the book. Welcome back to BOOKSTORM Podcast, book lovers. As you know, we're bringing you the very best fiction, the very most talented authors. We have one with us here today. We're so excited to welcome Virginia Kantra to BOOKSTORM with her new release, The Fairytale Life of Dorothy Gale. We loved it. Welcome, Virginia.
Chris and Kristen, thank you so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be here with you.
Well, we're very excited. We have listeners in 70 countries now, all 50 states, and more than 1,400 some cities. So we're doing the right thing here on BOOKSTORM, thanks to talented authors like you. I want to dive down into this beautiful story. But first, I want to tell our listeners a little bit about you, because there may be something they don't know. Did you know that Virginia Kantra is the New York Times best-selling author of over 30 novels? And Kristen and I love this part, about strong women, messy families, and a search for a place to call home. Her stories have earned a lot of awards, including 2 Romance Writers of America Awards, 2 National Reader's Choice Awards, starred reviews from Publishers Weekly, American Library Association, Booklist, praise from People Magazine, and Library Journal. Wow. In the book we're here to talk to her about today, The Fairytale Life of Dorothy Gale, I have to quote what Amy Popel, the author, said, because I think this sums it up beautifully. She says, "This is a poignant novel about recovery from the deepest wounds, the true meaning of home, and the delicious satisfaction of regaining control of one's own story." Yes, Amy, we could not agree more. Welcome to Virginia, married to her college sweetheart, living in North Carolina. Thrilled to have you with us today.
Well, thank you so much. And that was just an overwhelmingly kind introduction.
Well-deserved. You earned it, and it's well-deserved.
Absolutely.
Well, this was exciting for me. I love that you're so focused on the woman's journey, because that's what The Wizard of Oz always is. I know everybody's familiar with the really iconic 1939 movie, but of course, before that, it was a children's book. It was America's first great fairy tale. And even then, you can kind of see its feminist roots, because the hero, the protagonist, is not a European prince. It's a Kansas farm girl. L. Frank Baum was himself married to the daughter of one of the founders of the suffragist movement here in the United States. And his wedding vows were so unusual, they were reported in the local newspaper. Because the promises the bride made, this is quoted in the paper, were exactly the same as the promises required of the groom. So we assumed that the word obey was left out. And then he created this amazing fantasy world where the women have the power. If you look at the witches, who, McGuire did such an amazing job reimagining in his Wicked. Or you look at Ozma, who is the eventual ruler of Oz, who at one time was briefly a boy. You see that they have the power. But I loved Dorothy as a little girl because she was so ordinary. She was I could imagine myself as being her. She has She cries, she gets afraid, but she's very resilient, as children can be. And she has a wonderfully kind heart and a certain emotional honesty. And I think those are virtues that children can relate to. And I wanted to preserve that kind of every woman quality of hers when I aged her up to her 20s, which I think for many of us is now the modern coming of age, and set her off on her new adventures. So it was really important to me to to kind of preserve that sense of a female protagonist setting off to find her power and find a place to call home.
That sums it up perfectly. In case for any of our listeners, in case you didn't already notice from the title, the book is a takeoff on The Wizard of Oz, which we all love. And Kristen's going to take us into a little more of the story before we dive down deep.
Absolutely. Virginia, as you were talking about those beautiful qualities that Dorothy possessed in the movie, we see those in your protagonist. And she goes by Dee, although her name is Dorothy. But Dee and her sister Tony are both still reeling a bit after their mother's death. Their mother was an artist who traveled all over the world and was subsequently absent for a good part of their growing up. And they already had a complicated relationship with her. After her death, the girls settled with Uncle Henry and Aunt Em in Kansas, where Dee attended graduate school. Now, in this story, she has a relationship with a faculty member, and things come crumbling down when he, as a best selling novelist, shines a light on their relationship and takes a few liberties with what he describes. She is humiliated and she flees. She goes to a writing program in Trinity College, Dublin. Now, there, she makes some beautiful new friendships. And I just want to highlight a couple. We meet Sam Cleary. He's seemingly brainless. He runs a news agent shop, but he dropped out of college, and we see he has a love of literature. We also meet Tim Woodman. He's a bit stuck in his past, a little bit wooden. We also meet Riti, who longs for the courage to tell her parents that she wants to teach instead of maybe pursuing the family business. Now, Dee faces some pretty significant challenges in this new environment, especially with her very difficult faculty advisor. But now she has to make some very hard choices about who she is and where is home. Did you want to add anything to that backdrop?
I think it's absolutely wonderful. That was a great synopsis. I wish I had you to write my back cover blurbs for me.
She'll do it.
The one thing that I will say is the movement in the story for me is from how Dee is presented by best-selling novelist Grayson Kettering, and how she does claim control of her own story. Because at the beginning, we talk a lot about the male gaze, and he objectifies her, he minimizes her, he sexualizes her, he exploits her. And she really second guesses herself because everything he does, she reasons at one point, I let him do. And it's only because she escapes that really toxic relationship that she's able to find her own voice and tell her own story. And so by the end of it, we don't see Dee through the eyes of Grayson Kettering, but we hear Dee speaking for herself. And that was an important part for me. That's not a spoiler, I don't think.
Well, I'll tell you, when he called her thoughts derivative and unoriginal, that was burning me up throughout this entire book. In fact, you had so many cool ironic things going on in this entire story, but it got me.
I had to, it was interesting because, of course, as a writer, I do read my own reviews and I love the positive ones, but the ones I return to again and again are the bad ones. There are certain phrases that just kind of burn in your memory that you obsess over at 3 a.m. And so when I was writing the backstory with Greg Kettering, and what would he have said about her and what would wound her deeply.
Yep.
I had to come up with that stuff. And I remember at one point, the one that I remember, because I think she remembers it, is her mind was like her clothing, you know, gently used and slightly worn or something. I mean, it was just, kind of these ways of, as I say, diminishing her. Um, which was why it was so important for her to snatch back that narrative.
And that's why we loved her so much, because it is real life things that we deal with today that we watch Dee go through. And we love to hate him. And we love to see her character growth through the whole story. So I'm going to say thank you for taking us along the yellow brick road with Dee, aka Dorothy, into the Emerald Isle of Ireland and Trinity College. We learned some valuable lessons by her side. She thought she was in love, but it wasn't true love. How many of us can relate to that? I love this quote. She said, "The thing is, I tried so hard to be worthy of him. And I guess I've realized that he was never going to love me. No matter what I did, I couldn't change him. I can't make him give me what I want, no matter what I did. All I can change is my own response." Wow. Could you expand as the writer? Why is it that we want these things that we can't have, including Dee and all of us in the real world? And why do we hold on to a relationship when the red flag tells us it isn't real?
That's two really excellent questions. But the first one, I'm going to give a little bit of pushback. I think, hopeful romantic that I am, that we can have these things if we find the right people. So I think at the beginning of the book, Dee feels she doesn't have a choice. I mean, I don't want to underestimate the power of being with someone who, he's in a position of authority. He's an older, accomplished man. And she doesn't regard herself really as his equal. And she thinks she has no choice. She doesn't have she's not as complicit in her own seduction as she thinks. And she feels very stuck. She's at the beginning of the book, she's literally stuck on her aunt's couch. She's on her aunt's couch crying and drinking tea. And when her aunt, tries to nudge her a little bit, she says, it's better than drinking wine under a bridge. But she's stuck. She doesn't see her choices. She thinks she can't have what she wants because she can't have it from Gray. It's really important that she recognize that she does have agency, that she does have choice, and that she surrounds herself with people who see the real Dee, who see who she is and who see who she can become. So that's one. Now, the red flags part, should we go there?
Let's go there.
Okay, again, I think it's that, like me, she is a hopeful romantic. And because of her upbringing with her mom, she really yearns for love. I actually quite like her aunt and her that relationship, and looking at how, as her vision matures, that she sees that relationship with new eyes, I think is an important part of her growing and healing process. But she yearns for love. And Gray offers her a reasonable enough facsimile that she persuades herself that this is it. And so I think that's we yearn for connection. We want to be loved. And when someone tells her as he does, "You're so special, you know, you're my muse." Mind you, a muse is not the hero of her own story. It's an adjunct to his, but that's powerful and seductive stuff. And I think women get told things like that by men a lot.
Mhm. Absolutely. Yes, we loved her character. It helped that she got away from there, I believe, and into a different environment with different people and a new her, perhaps. But listeners, are you hearing this? It's pretty cool. And it's something we can all relate to.
Well, I think she's driven basically from Kansas. She takes the job at Trinity College, Dublin. Dorothy's destination in The Wizard of Oz is always the Emerald City, right? So initially, when I was thinking about this book, I thought she was going to Seattle. But I wrote it during the pandemic. And you remember lockdown? Do you remember that feeling of being trapped, sort of like Dee on her couch? We're all stuck in our homes. And Seattle is great, but it wasn't magic enough. It wasn't different enough. I really wanted to create that iconic movie moment when the farmhouse lands in Munchkin Land, and you've been following along on very emotional tween Dorothy's journey, but it's all in sepia tones of black and white, and there's this moment when she opens the door, and it becomes kind of this wonderful. Everything is Technicolor suddenly. It's a vision of what can be, and it shakes her up. It's a whole new world out there. And that's really what I wanted to create. And that's why she ends up in Ireland. So the Emerald Isle for the Emerald City.
Loved it.
And I think whatever it takes to shake us out of our rut can be a good thing.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. There are so many beautiful metaphors and symbolism, even beyond the Wizard of Oz story, that I just loved it. Chris and I actually have been going back and forth on several of these for the past several weeks. So that's pretty cool.
Thank
Um,
you.
Virginia, I loved the character Riti. She was loyal. She is a clear thinker. And she offers some really spot on insights to Dee, especially about her relationship with her younger sibling, Tony. Riti reminds Dee that Tony is her sister, not her child. And in fact, Sam and Dee are both navigating relationships with siblings, even younger siblings. And it's hard not to parent them when your actual parent is too busy or absent. And I think that's a very tremendous burden that older siblings sometimes take on. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that because it's a big burden. And who takes care of the caregiver, the older sibling, when they need it?
I love Reedy so much. And she was an important character for me to embrace. I think that she's one of the people whose love shows Dorothy that she's worthy of love, which is an important thing for all of us. That sisterhood, that sense that we are fine the way we are. Um, as far as Dee and Sam and the way they navigate their personal responsibilities, it's something that they have in common. It brings them together. I actually really admire caretakers. I think so. I didn't want to uh, denigrate that role in any way. I think that I am a younger sister, but there are times when I have acted like the older sister, and I'm proud of that role, and I'm proud of the nurturing role. And I think perhaps one difference between the heroine's journey and the hero's journey is that we hold on to some of these nurturing and protective qualities. And that's good. These are virtues. But it's sort of like being in an airplane. When the oxygen masks fall down, you have to put on your own before you can help anybody else. So I think that's something Dee learns, and without spoilers, I think Sam also needs to learn, and his mom makes really clear to him at one point. You need to figure out what you need and live your life by that, and not by what everybody around you needs.
Yeah.
And the way that you do that, okay, I was going to say years of therapy, but but I think for writers, fiction is our therapy. We write stories to learn. So I think as readers, we read stories to see characters navigate these choices.
Yeah.
And then by either agreeing with them or disagreeing with them, we learn about ourselves.
Yeah. Well, your writing is such that you are on that journey with all of the characters because they're all kind of navigating new situations, new friendships, and you just find yourself pulled in to their world and you're a part of it. You're their new friend. You're, a family member. So I enjoyed that. And I appreciate what you said about those sibling relationships and that nurturing because I think it's also true even in a parental context where we've got to make sure that we are taking care of ourselves because it makes us a better parent, one that is better equipped to navigate the tricky things that come along with parenting. Yeah.
Absolutely. I think that that's really important. And again, I think that what we learn from our friends along the way is an important part of the original Wizard of Oz. It's an important part of the fairy tale life of Dorothy Gale. And it's an important part of our lives as women.
Absolutely. And I got to go back to Dee because I just can't get away from her. I love everything about her. She also said this quote, I've always been afraid to show my true thoughts and feelings, afraid of being judged as too weird, too opinionated, too much, or not enough. I was shamed when I didn't speak up. I was embarrassed when I did. Well, yes, Dee, we've all felt this way from time to time. But how did Dee and how do all of us reach the point in our lives where other people's opinions don't matter anymore? Is it freedom? Is it strength? Is it old age?
Again, years of therapy. No.
Therapy.
Um, I don't think we ever get to a point where other people's opinions don't matter. Certainly, we all want to be present for the people that we love. I think the difference is when we are defined as something other than ourselves. We've talked a little bit about Dee and her friendships and the way that she's both a catalyst for their growth, but also how they help her see herself in a new way. And I'd like to talk a little bit about the two men who come into her lives. I have been together, as you noted at the beginning of our chat, with the same man for it's going on 50 years now.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And when you're with someone, when I teach classes about romance, or when I talk to my kids about finding their life partner, I use the phrase, the vision of the beloved in the eyes of the lover. The idea being that your match is someone who can see you for who you are, who can uncover, and these are usually things that maybe other people can see, but maybe not, but obvious virtues, who can uncover things in you that maybe aren't as obvious, and then who can challenge you to become your best self. So the vision of the beloved in the eyes of the lover is an important part of your growth because it's I accept you for who you are, but I see who you can be.
Oh, I
And
love that.
I think that Dee learns to see the reflection of herself in her lover's eyes and in her friend's eyes, and that gives her faith in herself. And then the opinions of the other things don't matter as much.
Mhm. I like that. I like what you said. I accept you as you are. Because there was one scene in the book where Dee said, people can change. And Tim said, not their very nature. Feelings are meaningless without actions to support them. I've heard this said, words are meaningless without actions, but I liked this, feelings are meaningless without actions to support them. People don't change. I've been married for 38 years. We have evolved and grown together and separately and accepted it. But if you start into a relationship thinking that's not anybody that I want, I'm going to change them. This was some wisdom here from Tim.
Yeah, I loved one of the things I was playing with Dee and Tim is the difference between words and actions, love languages, basically. So his love language obviously is action. And for Dee, who is a writer and who has been seduced by words before, her love language is words. So she's much quicker to speak her feelings in almost all situations um, than he is. So, do I completely agree with him? I do agree with him, but words are important too, which is I think a something that anyone who's been in a 38-year relationship probably understands that occasionally you need those strokes.
Yes, you do. It's so true. Just loved it.
I want to stick with Tim just for a second because there's something else that he said. He said, fairy tales are more true, not because they tell us dragons exist, but because they tell us that dragons can be beaten. Now, we've all grown up with fairy tales, and many of us have focused on maybe the romantic or the wishful thinking end of it. But Tim kind of reframes them for us. And I wanted to just ask you about that because, you know, why do we need or want to believe in fairy tales? Is Tim right about the dragons?
He's absolutely right about all of it, but he's not an original thinker. Um, that sentiment about fairy tales and dragons has a long and slightly ambiguous history. It could have started with G.K. Chesterton. It's certainly been quoted by Neil Gaiman, a modern spinner of wonderful fairy tales. And I'm most familiar to it from C.S. Lewis's Narnia books, which were another set of childhood favorites that I will never retell. Um, but there's a wonderful moment in the silver chair, and forgive me if I geek out a little bit here, where the children and the prince have been captured by, in this case, an evil witch, and they're underground, cut off from light, under enchantment, and she has them all kind of drowsily nodding that there is no world but this. There is no Aslan, the magical lion. There is there is nothing but what is that we can see that is here. And she's droning on and they're nodding and they're falling asleep. They're falling under her spell. And at that moment, a the character of Puddle Glum the Marsh Wiggle, who is a big froggy man and about the least romantic hero you can ever imagine, goes over to her magical fire and stomps on it with his wet, froggy feet. and tells her that that's all very well and you're probably right. There probably is nothing beyond this. And, but we've made it all up. It's just the dream made up by a couple of children and a frog. But at that moment, there's, first of all, there's the smell of burnt frog and his croaking voice. But it's a call. It's if two children and a frog can make up a story that beats your world hollow, if we can make up a better life, a better world than you live in, then I will be on the side of Aslan, even if there is no Aslan. So I think what I will say is I will be on the side of love, true love, even if I'm wrong. I will believe that we can find happiness and be empowered even when life beats me down, because it's worth believing in.
Absolutely. And, first of all, C.S. Lewis, we're big fans. He's a very deep thinker, but so are you. And that was one of the really cool things about this book, because there were, surface analogies, there were deeper analogies, and then there were really deep analogies and metaphors and things to be thinking about. But this idea of a fairy tale, I think, is one that we all have to kind of reckon with at some point in our life, because it really represents what is our vision of love and our vision of home. So you called it geeking out, but I love that little detour because it really is an embodiment of so many things that you broached in the story.
Well, thank you. This is, I know we're not supposed to have a favorite book any more than we're supposed to have a favorite child. But I really loved writing this story. I really found so much joy in telling it. And that was something that I wanted to share with my readers. So it means a lot to me that it touched you. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Yes, it is wonderful. I'm going to hold it up again for our YouTube watchers. The Fairy Tale Life of Dorothy Gale. Yes, I agree, Virginia. We believe in love, true love. And the lessons in this are you hold out for it. You keep believing in it. You believe in yourself and you can find it. It's a fairy tale in itself that we all want to climb into and be a part of. And before we let you go, though, what are you working on next? Can you give us any clues?
I can, and thanks so much for asking. So I've been talking about these stories that shaped me. So I did a retelling of Louisa May Alcott's Little Women in two parts, Megan, Jo, and Beth and Amy. And then I did The Wizard of Oz, which I know doesn't seem like a likely candidate for being turned into women's fiction, but truly worked. And my editor suggested that I try Anne of Green Gables,
Excellent.
which
Oh,
was
this is
another
great.
formative novel for me. But I have to tell you, I originally told her no, because I didn't see my way into the story. I didn't see that deeper truth that I wanted to tell. And then because in the worlds of Little Women and in the fairy tale life of Dorothy Gale, the works that inspired my writing don't exist. So in Dorothy Gale's world, she is Dorothy Gale. So there was no The Wizard of Oz by L. Frank Baum or wonderful 1939 movie or Broadway musical smash Wicked. In Anne of a Different Island, I'm dealing with another imaginative, loving, vibrant, insecure young woman who is coming of age and who has always imagined herself as Anne Shirley, who wants to be her literary hero. And I want to talk about the ways that fiction both comforts us, inspires us, gives us understanding, but it's not our life. And so one of the things she has to deal with is how does she tell her own story? When does she live her own life? maybe with the lessons of the books that she's read and the love, true love that she believes in from the romances she devours. But how does she make that her own? And so I'm kind of want to play a little bit with that interplay of life and fiction.
That sounds fantastic. You're onto something with this. It is a beautiful story about women empowerment, women growth, women having a voice, women finding their own story and making their own story instead of it being written for them. This is all the stuff Kristen and I love. And so I've got to say, readers, you have to pick up this book. You're going to love it. In the meantime, connect with Virginia Kantra. You can find her at her website, virginiakantra.com, where you can join her mailing list. You can also find her on Facebook and on Instagram. It's been an absolute, just a real treat talking to you here today. Thoroughly enjoyed it.
I have loved being here. You guys ask wonderful questions, and this has been a lot of fun. Thank you.
We hope to see you back again.
Chris, we broach so many important subjects, not just from a women's standpoint, but just even from relational standpoint, talking about these sibling relationships, the importance of friends. I want to kind of throw that out there because in this story, we saw where Dee starts developing very deep friendships with both men and women, and they were very important to her growth. And I wanted to see if you wanted to comment on that because what a beautiful thing that was to watch.
You know, I loved that when she went to Ireland, started at Trinity, kind of left the little situation that she was in. Sometimes you have to separate from places or people in order to become who you have the ability to become. And I think Virginia Contra showed us that in both the lives of Dorothy from The Wizard of Oz and Dorothy Gale in this book, because, you know, it's so true what Virginia said. Every experience that we have in our lives shapes and forms who we eventually become. Every friendship, every interaction, every career path, every romantic relationship changes or alters us in a certain way. And either good or bad, that's where our choice comes in. How are we going to allow it to change us? But I thought that was a beautiful life truth. How about you, Kristen?
Yeah, I agree. And speaking of change, I thought it was really interesting. You had asked her about these red flags that we see in people. And I think there's some of us, I'm sure myself included, that we think we can change those red flags where you can love somebody enough that they see the wisdom of a better way and change themselves. But we really can't control what other people do, right? We can only control how we respond or how we choose to act. And I loved when you asked her about that because she had obviously thought about that very deeply in this story.
And yes, and I love the way Virginia answered that despite the red flags, despite the difficult times in life, she still believes in love. Dorothy believed in love. Dorothy Gale believed in love. She was just looking for the true love, the honest love, the right love. So even if you have a relationship that's been difficult or a friendship or a romantic relationship or a business, you can't then disparage all future opportunities. You've got to say, okay, yes, this is bad. It doesn't mean they're all bad. And I really liked the way she said that.
Yeah, I like what you said too, because we could apply that to religion. We could apply that to restaurants. That's a very good way of thinking. We can't have an all or nothing thinking about something because there's these unique attributes that we should examine, and it's worth examining and diving in on those. Go ahead.
Or you could even say politics or government. We can't say we're throwing everything out just because of, here's an old saying, a few bad apples.
Right.
I like this quote too, you know, that Tim says, people can't change, not their very nature. Whether we agree with Tim or not, this is food for thought. Feelings are meaningless without actions. Words are meaningless without actions. This is, I think Tim was right on here to a certain extent. I'm not even talking about other people. I'm talking about my own self. If you claim something and you say, I feel this so strongly, and you vocalize it, but you don't act upon it, do you really believe it? Do you really feel it? This is something I don't have an answer to.
Yeah, I like that, especially because when you do act on it, you'll get a sense of, am I going in the right direction? How legitimate and how deep are these feelings? So I think that's an excellent thing for people to intentionally think about.
I like this too. I just want to sum this up because this was a quote and I wanted to bring it up to her, but it didn't come in the book. This quote: women who tell the truth have always been called witches. Oh, really? Well, you know what I wanted to say to that? Okay, call us whatever you like. I love women who tell the truth, who stand up for the truth, who have the courage to be the only voice in the middle of the crowd. And I just love that little quote.
That is a great quote. Listen, I'm a 30-year litigator. I've been called a witch, I'm sure, many times.
I'm not a litigator and I've still been called a witch. So listeners, we're so happy that you joined us today. Guess what we have next? Oh my goodness. I keep saying, Kristen, don't book anybody else. We're so full here, but we love it. We love it so much. Patricia Cornwell, Unnatural Death. Jenny Colgan, Midnight at the Christmas Bookshop. Nick Petrie, The Price You Pay. Jill Shavis, The Bright Spot. Viola Shipman, The Wishing Bridge. Mary Kubica, She's Not Sorry. AJ Hartley, Heideke Smith, Demon Dueler. CJ Ray, The Excitements. Joyce Maynard, The Bird Hotel. Michelle Gable, Beautiful People. Emma Gray, The Last Love Note. Woo, I'm tired just from saying it.
And listeners, thank you for joining us. Thank you for sharing our socials. And we love these deep conversations. And boy, did we go deep today. When C.S. Lewis comes up in a conversation, you're going deep. But we want you to stay on the radar with us. You can find us on bookstormpodcast.com. You can find us on Facebook, on Instagram, on TikTok, on X. And we'd love for you to look us up on YouTube. We have a whole bunch of beautiful videos there. You will enjoy them, I promise, just like today's. Of course, until next time, one of the best ways to brave the storm is to dive down deep with life-changing fiction.